Over 7 years ago now, Animal Crossing Wild World was ported over to the Wii U for the very first time. This seemed like a fairly unexpected move. After all, Animal Crossing Wild World was definitely designed for the DS, not a console. In fact, at this time, people could even still play Animal Crossing City Folk on their Wii U. This set the precedent that Animal Crossing games could be ported over to future consoles that they weren't originally designed for. Although in my opinion it's pretty unlikely we'll see a port of a game like Animal Crossing New Leaf, ones like Wild World, City Folk, and even the original Animal Crossing GameCube game I feel like are a strong possibility on the Nintendo Switch. After all, Nintendo has been making more and more moves to expand their retro game library, and they've even made this a big incentive of their Nintendo Switch Online membership bundles. We're still actually yet to see DS games or even GameCube games make their way to the Nintendo Switch, let alone Wii games, but it does feel like something that is an inevitability. After all, we did have these games on the Wii U, so it just makes sense to bring them over to the now superior Nintendo Switch. And although people might have concerns about how exactly these would play, especially a DS game which has multiple screens, Nintendo managed to do this pretty well over on the Wii U, and they even designed special modes in which you could view the game so you had plenty of options. So don't worry, it definitely is possible for these games to run on the Nintendo Switch, even if they weren't necessarily designed for them. Now, I feel like the prospect of seeing Animal Crossing City Folk on the Nintendo Switch to be a little bit iffy. After all, this is a much more recent game, it's not exactly a retro one, and I can't really imagine them ever having Wii games on the Nintendo Switch. But in my opinion, Animal Crossing Wild World is definitely a given, it's just a matter of when. Nintendo has already taken the time to port this over, so it shows that it's something they can easily do without too much effort, and they even made changes to Animal Crossing Wild World so it worked better. For example, they removed the requirement of you having to go online in order to get your Nook store finally upgraded. This shows that although it was a pretty straightforward port, they did put some effort in, and I can't imagine them not wanting to use this again for the Nintendo Switch with how popular the system actually is. It's very likely in my opinion that a lot of Animal Crossing players now have never even tried Animal Crossing Wild World and they don't have a means to. Surprisingly, picking up a copy of the game can actually end up being fairly expensive, especially if you need to buy a DS as well, so it would make sense for Nintendo to make it a perk of their online membership. This happens to be the favorite Animal Crossing game of so many people since the DS was such a huge system and a first for many players, so I feel like a lot of new Animal Crossing players definitely need to get introduced to this one, and I do feel like it's very likely that they will. Once again, for any concerns about the controls and such, they already alleviated this with the Wii U, so they could easily do this on the Nintendo Switch as well. Quickly, I just want to say this video is sponsored by Disney Emoji Blitz. You can download the game using my link in the description. I'm currently hosting a giveaway for playing the game as well, so make sure to download the game using my link in the description, get to level 20, screenshot this and send it to me on Instagram at Crossing Channel. Be sure to enter before August the 20th and you could win a $30 Amazon gift card. In terms of Animal Crossing GameCube, that's one that I'm not so sure about. I definitely feel like it is a possibility, but they would probably have to rewrite some of the old dialogue, as nowadays it might not go over so well. Don't get me wrong, those old Animal Crossing games had really amazing dialogue, but some of it is a bit dated for 2022. Nintendo very carefully curates their games, and I'm not so sure if they've made changes in this regard to retro games, but I feel like that is definitely something they could do for Animal Crossing GameCube if they did decide to port it over. One thing I definitely don't think would happen is them porting over the N64 version, however, which only appeared in Japan. After all, they would have to retranslate that entire game, which is definitely something they're not going to take the effort to do. That would be way too much work for a game that is basically given out for free. And how about remasters? Would they actually take the time to remaster these games into HD for the Switch? Well, that is something sadly I think is very unlikely, given they didn't really do this with the Mario collection that we had on the Switch. That collection definitely should have been released as a sort of remaster or even a remake, but it was a pretty straightforward port over to the Switch. That tells me that something like Animal Crossing definitely wouldn't get that amount of love. It would certainly be amazing though to play Animal Crossing GameCube or even Wild World in HD over on your Switch, even if they just upscaled it and smoothed out the textures to make it look really nice. After all, these games are pretty old now and people might not be used to these graphics. But of course, Animal Crossing fans know these are amazing games, and I think anyone who tried them would really get sunk into them, especially as games like Animal Crossing GameCube have so many interesting details and content that we don't have in Animal Crossing New Horizons. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you think that it's a possibility we could see old Animal Crossing games ported over to Nintendo Switch, or do you think that's something they won't do this time around? If you made it to the end of the video, then be sure to comment Bob's Gang down below so I know that you did. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn on channel notifications for more Animal Crossing videos. I want to say thank you to these channel members for supporting me and the content that I make here. Their contributions allow me to keep making videos. If you want to support these videos and get some great perks for doing so, like access to our members only Discord, exclusive Bob emojis and live streams, and much more, then click the join button down below the video or the link in the description.